And we want to welcome to the show lawyer and campaigner, columnist at Stuff as well. It is Max Harris. Max, thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Kia ora, Pat. Thanks for having me on.
This afternoon, as we record this, Now, you are a part of the group that signed on to the letter to say the quote-unquote advert, air quotes, that Hobson's pledge did in the Herald was, amongst other things, abhorrent and misleading. I wanted to know how this group of people came together. What was the spark, and how did so many people come together so quickly to say, no, sister? Like, how did that all happen?
Yeah, so it was a small group of lawyers and legal academics who I think were all really shocked to see the Herald put this front page ad from Hobson's pledge up. And we just reached out to some of our communities, and very quickly there was a huge response. And I think the desire was to get a quick response out to make it clear that like a line had been crossed here. So we got to about 175 signatures on an open letter. And yeah, I wasn't the one whose idea this was, or the kind of key driver behind it, but I was supporting it. And then we've also kind of kept the letter open. And so I think now we've got about 300 signatures from the broader legal community.
Wow. Just the logistics of it. I don't want to get caught up in the logistics, but how does the logistics of that work? I mean, does a person write it and everyone goes, check, or does like a couple of people write it and there's a bit of toing and froing and then you put the final draft out?
Yeah, it was sort of iterative. So yeah, someone did a first draft and shared it with a couple of us, and we checked a couple of those points, went back. As we got some early feedback, we folded that in, and then we kind of locked a version and sent it out to our communities. A lot of it done through a WhatsApp group, which is the way a lot of organising happens, right?
Very good. Now, look, we did feature this a bit last night, and we talked through the Herald article, and we talked about actually the steps. I think there's four, and there are four main points. Yeah. So not to reiterate exactly all of those, would maybe more like to get a bit of a vibe from you as to what do you see of this advert, air quotes again for the audio podcast, that's most abhorrent, that's most dangerous to the country?
There's a lot that's pretty abhorrent and dangerous in it. I think, saying that the foreshore and seabed needs to be restored is just flat out inaccurate, and also, as we say in the letter, likely to mislead and deceive. So it's not just untrue, it's also kind of walking people down quite a dangerous path. So the current law says the foreshore and seabed cannot be owned by the Crown or anyone. So to say that it kind of needs to be restored as if Māori have are kind of taking it away is highly inaccurate and deceptive. Also, what it says about we are all New Zealanders, and a lot of the later lines we think are likely to fuel racism. And stepping back and stepping away from the letter, I think one point that I would want to make is that I think throughout New Zealand's history there have been these attempts to whip up fear about supposedly Māori threats to power, and that is always done to prime people, and especially non-Māori, for kind of racist responses. So this isn't new. We saw this around the time of the foreshore and seabed. We saw this in response to co-governance, and I just think we need to kind of draw a red line on that and say this kind of thing has led to a lot of damage. It happened before the Waikato War in the 1860s, right? So this idea that Māori were kind of creeping up by stealth to justify an invasion, and I think when you see this happen in cycles, I think it's important for us, especially as Pākehā, who have benefited in different ways from this, to say no more. 20 years after the foreshore and seabed, we don't want this kind of debate to continue like this. And that's kind of what we're trying to do through this letter.
A huge number, as you say, upwards of 300 now, probably more to come, of academics and legal experts are speaking out against this. Do you have any understanding as to what Hobson's pledge legal team is? Do they have any legal precedents to set here? Or is this a Don Brash wet dream, I want because I want?
Yeah, I'm not sure about their legal team. I know they have a lot of resources, but looking at this ad, it doesn't look like they've made a good faith attempt to understand the law or be accurate. And I think that takes us to the Herald's obligations here. And I think the Herald has a responsibility as a big outlet to think about, whether it runs these full-page ads, whether it just responds to people that want to pay for the ads. We think that they needed to be much more careful than how they were here, that they are likely to mislead or deceive. And one other point to add just about the legal community is, as you know, and as your listeners will know, the legal community tends to be very cautious, especially about getting involved in politics. And so to have this level of response is quite unusual, and it speaks to how disgraceful, in my view, this ad is, and how inaccurate and divisive it is.
Does the big concern around this ad come from the dis and misinformation? Because obviously we've had this conversation, and we had Matthew Tukaki on from Wātea on Monday night, and one of the things we asked him, because we want to cover this off, is when the CTU did their front page on the advert, that seemed like an obvious opinion piece, whereas this seems like spitting facts and accuracies. Is that the big difference, or would you lean towards even these big raps like people like the CTU maybe should be thought of twice?
Yeah, personally, I think probably some advocacy advertisements are okay. That's my personal view, as long as they're very clearly flagged. But I think any publisher needs to be really clear that they're accurate, or that they're very obviously tagged as opinion. I think there are several aspects of this ad that crossed the line in that respect. There was kind of a top banner with references to other stories in the Herald, which kind of made this look like it was Herald content. And I think the inaccuracies are like very clear to anyone that knows anything about this issue. And I think, the Herald's used to checking on the accuracy of opinion columns. And so it's not that onerous for the Herald to think twice. And in fact, we know, because the Herald rejected a second ad, that they could reject this. It's not that their hands are completely tied. And I guess that's what we're saying in the letter.
Is there any kind of part of this we have to think about? Did they reject the second advert because of the blowback, or are they acknowledging they got the first one wrong? So they're going, we shouldn't have done that. There are actually two different reasons why one would reject an advert.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I don't know exactly. So I'm guessing like the rest of us, but I think there was quite significant blowback, and I was heartened to see that. I haven't seen that many people beyond some trolls who I'd expect it from really go into bat for the ad. So yeah, I would like to think it was reflecting on that first decision, looking at the public response, reflecting on their responsibility. And I'd say this cautiously, because I think there is still racism in the community to be combated. But I do think that the community is moving on from 2003, 2004, those Kiwi iwi ads. We see Te Reo Māori, much more frequently used, as everyone said. You see it at the supermarket, you see it Celebrity Treasure Island, you see it on TV in the community. And I think there is this gradual recognition that actually excluding and marginalising Indigenous part of the New Zealand community is wrong. And I'd like to think the Herald's kind of taking that into account as well.
It is ironic, though, that I believe, correct me if I'm wrong from your memory, the iwi Kiwi campaign was when Don Brash was leading the National Party. He was a part of the iwi Kiwi, and now Don Brash is leading Hobson's pledge. Do you have an inkling or an idea as to why they're trying to do this? Like, what's behind it?
Yeah, so the background context is, the government has said that it's going to overturn this decision that was reached by the Court of Appeal on the marine and coastal area legislation. And it's pretty controversial what the government's doing there, right? So they are not just overturning a court decision, which is unusual, they're also kind of interrupting this court process, because it was going to be heard by the Supreme Court, which is even more unusual. So they're not letting the kind of court appeal go through the usual process. And what I think Hobson's pledge are trying to do is to try to get in behind the government, essentially, and to try to whip up public fear and distort the facts in order to give the the government some backing for what is a very anti-Māori move. And yeah, what I would like to think is that actually the majority of people in New Zealand recognise that whipping up false statements and anti-Māori racism is absolutely wrong. But what Hobson's Pledge wants to do is try to amplify that small minority in favour of what I think is very wrong government action.
I think about this government, and I mean, there's too many to mention, which is a sad thing to say, but I think about the Māori Health Authority. I think about Māori wards, instructions for councils to do that. I think about the treaty referendum. I think about, use of te reo in government departments.
Yep.
And it feels like that this Hobson's Pledge campaign attack is not sort of in spite of any other feeling in the community. It feels like it sits very comfortably beside what this government's already pushing through.
Yep, I think that's right. And in a way, it's trying to bolster that in response to these very strong public responses we've seen in the community, like the activations we've seen, the real public outcry about the Treaty Principles Bill, and the opposition to Māori wards, Section 7AA, and the other issues you mentioned. So I think it's almost a sign of desperation from Hobson's Pledge, and also from the government in trying to kind of claw back some public support. But I don't want to suggest in saying it's desperate that these people don't have power and resources. They do, and that's why I think it's so important we all speak up about it.
Amongst the legal fraternity, is there any kind of conversation around legally what one could do about this advertising campaign? I mean, the Advertising Standards Authority putting out falsehoods, is that kind of conversation happening at all behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think there have been a few lawyers who signed onto this letter encouraging people to make complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority, as well as those complaints to the Herald, letters to the editor. Beyond that, I haven't heard anything. Obviously, there are legal challenges being taken to other aspects of the government's agenda, but I haven't heard that being discussed on this issue.
As far as you're aware, the group that you're involved with, 170, 300 signatories, has there been any direct engagement with that group and the Herald or Hobson's Pledge?
Yep, so there has been engagement with the Herald. So that group sent the letter first to the Herald. Thought it's good to let the Herald know what the group thinks, not with Hobson's Pledge.
And how was with the Herald's response? Was they going to cancel, obviously, the next advert, but was there anything about their process? Did they acknowledge anything to the group as far as you know? Did they make a mistake? Or are they just taking a step back? There's that adage in media, and I've been involved for a long time, that you never apologise. Because if you apologise, you admit culpability. If you admit culpability, there could be repercussions from that.
Yeah. As far as I know, there hasn't been any acknowledgement like that. The Herald did run a story on the response. And I think one point that I just made personally as well is several weeks ago, the Herald ran a great series called Whenua on the history of land takings, and acknowledged, the Herald did, that its own coverage contributed to some of those historical injustices. And I think, if the Herald is being serious like that about its role in New Zealand society and its role in relation to racism and colonisation, then I think it's consistent with that for the Herald also to continue to reflect on what it's doing here.
I think one point of credit to the Herald, and I've mentioned this already on the show, is that they've covered the fallout quite well. Shane Curry has done quite an incredible job actually saying, this is what's being said about this place that I used to be the editor of and now I'm writing for. So, credit for that. I want to read one thing out of one of the articles, because there's been several of them, and this is the Māori Party and what they are deciding to do. They, in a statement on Friday, Pāti Māori announced they would no longer engage with Herald journalists because of the advertisement and the disgusting attack, that's quote-unquote disgusting attack, by Hobson's Pledge. It had also cancelled co-leader Debbie Ngaruapaka's regular Herald column. This is a quote: "The New Zealand Herald have allowed themselves to be bought off by a well-resourced anti-Māori collective. They have promoted misinformation on their front page so they can feast off the anti-Māori agenda being pursued by this government." That was what Rawiri Waititi said. That's a pretty massive statement to make by, they're in opposition, but one of our main political factions, to say, we ain't going to talk to you guys anymore. Then you've got Radio Wātea going, we're not going to work with you guys anymore. This is a big learning curve for the Herald as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. And yeah, I've seen a number of people post about cancelling subscriptions and yeah, kind of targeting the Herald at their bottom line. But I think, yeah, the broader point is I do think the Herald every day will think about the trade-off between, you know, its profit and other considerations, including being a responsible, accurate media outlet. So it's not unusual for the Herald to have to take that into account. And just to your earlier point as well, you know, like I've written for the Herald in the past. I think there are some good writers there. This is not about demonizing the Herald. It's about saying to any media outlet, you're offered, you know, presumably a large amount of money to print a front page, inaccurate, divisive ad. What is the responsible thing to do in Aotearoa in 2024? And we're saying this was an irresponsible mistake, and it would be good for that to be acknowledged.
When we talked about this, I don't know, the last couple of nights, we have a bunch of our live viewers said that they'd heard Don Brash say 25,000. So 25,000 for that advert is what's been reported, so we put it that way. Hey, it's been great talking to you today. I just want to spend 60 seconds, if we can, talking about another part of your vocation. You're a campaigner for Action Station. Do you want to tell the punters what Action Station is all about? Because it sounds amazing. I want more people to know.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I work as a lawyer most of the week, and then I do work part-time for Action Station. It's a progressive campaigning organisation, and so set up about 10 years ago. And it's always run a small number of in-house campaigns. So, for example, a campaign called Dental for All on bringing dental within the public healthcare system. And then it also offers a platform to community petitions, and it gives support, especially to kind of progressive community groups that are wanting to run petitions. It's been really strong on issues like Palestine, on the Treaty Principles Bill, on Māori wards, public housing. So yeah, check it out. People might know about some of the petitions, but it also hosts in-person events and community events. And yeah, it's a great place to work. And you know, I think we need stronger progressive infrastructure as well in Aotearoa, and I think this is a small part of what we need.
100%. If people want to find out more about that, actionstation.org.nz. Is there another hub anywhere for what's going on with Hobson's Pledge? You know, the group that you guys are together. Have you guys got a site, or is this really just individuals coming in together? Is there a place that people can check on that, how that's going as well?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, this was just like an organic group that came together. I think what it speaks to is the need for more people to speak up. I think around the Treaty Principles Bill, different communities I'm aware of have kind of pulled together to try to oppose that. But we kind of need more people to do that. Action Station's been doing a lot of work on Treaty Principles Bill, so if you want to do more on that, feel free to get in contact with Action Station. But you know, yeah, whether you're in you know, kind of religious communities or just like local communities, I think we need people speaking up more, and maybe a Pākehā non-Māori in particular, and saying, you know, we don't want to see this going forward. So if you have kind of authority in those communities, I think it's really important we all act collectively.
He's a columnist, he's a lawyer, he's a campaigner. He is Max Harris. Max, thanks so much for joining us today.
Kia ora, Pat. It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot.